Hi, I am Kate Canales, and I teach design and innovation in engineering school, but I actually want to start out by talking to you about dentistry. So I've had a recent insight about dentistry that's related to my talk, which is that my dentist started offering evening and weekend appointments, and I thought this was kind of interesting because evening and weekend appointments are a lot more convenient for me, and I would imagine they're a lot more convenient for a lot of his patients. And this is a win-win, because if I can get to the dentist more easily and theoretically more regularly, this is a win for my oral health, and this is also a win for his business. So stay with me here. Sometimes an innovation is technical. So in the dentistry example, you could imagine a new tool or a new chemical substance that allows us to prevent tooth decay better. This would be a technical innovation in dentistry. And sometimes an innovation is commercial. So a dentist who, say, takes an annual fee, sees you for whatever you need to be seen for, and you cut insurance out of the deal for a year. That might be a commercial innovation in dentistry. And sometimes innovation is human. Sometimes the only thing that changes about an offering is the way that people experience it. So do I think my dentist was being innovative, offering these new evening and weekend hours? I do. I think that what he did is he thought about what would matter to his patients, what would be convenient for his patients, and then he tweaked his offering. He innovated on his offering based on his understanding of our circumstances and our feelings. This is not a big deal in this particular case, but this is what we call empathy. And empathy, what I'm here to talk about today, is that I think empathy is the unsung key to innovation. As I said, I teach design in engineering school, and my area of expertise is actually in what the industry calls human-centered design, or said maybe another way, empathy in design. Applied empathy. And I have a belief that being innovative and being empathic are very closely linked. I didn't always know this. I started my career as a product designer. My first real job was at a group that was designing toys and other products for children. And I got really interested in ergonomics, in whether or not our designs could be used by smaller hands that had more limited dexterity. And this led really naturally to spending time with children, watching them play, and this led very naturally to a more interesting question, which is, did they think our designs were fun? So a toy can be perfectly engineered. It can be very cleverly conceived for manufacturing. It can use state-of-the-art materials. It can be ergonomically optimized. In other words, it can be technically perfect. But if a kid does not think it's fun to play with it, then it is nothing but a technically perfect piece of junk. And this was a really important insight for me as a designer. It changed the way I think about design. At the same time in my career, I had the privilege of learning from a man named Bill Moggridge, who is now famous for saying, design verbs, not nouns. So in this case, he might have said, design play, not toys. Here's another example. This is not a suitcase. Suitcase is a noun. This is schlepping. And the experience of schlepping the suitcase on the right is a far better human experience than schlepping the suitcase on the left. In fact, the difference between the suitcase on the right and the suitcase on the left represents the single biggest innovation in schlepping of all time. And it is a human innovation. It is an innovation based in empathy. It's an innovation based on an understanding for what a pain in the behind it is to carry a bunch of stuff from point A to point B. Now, finding empathy for the user of a product like this is not hard. This is something that we all kind of resonate with. And yet, we did not have this innovation on the right until 1987. 1987. This is the example that I like to cite when people say kind of wacky things like, there are no new ideas. Really, because 1987. How long were we schlepping before 1987? And then we finally had this idea. So there are a lot of new ideas. There are a lot of new ideas, and empathy is one way to find them. So here's a new idea that has me a little bit puzzled from the point of view of the human experience, from the point of view of empathy, the Segway. Now, the Segway is technically very impressive. It is technically innovative, and I do not mean to diminish that innovation and that technology. But what is the verb here? The Segway people promised us that the verb would be commuting, and that this would revolutionize commuting. But how does that work? So do I commute with this on the street? Well, no. It doesn't go that fast. That would be very dangerous. Okay, so can I commute on the sidewalk as I mow down the pedestrians? It's not very popular. It's not very well received. Can I commute with this in conjunction with my other commuting systems? Can I put it in my car? Can I easily get it onto the bus? So what I'm trying to say is, and I really don't know the story of the development of the Segway very well, but what I'm trying to say is that I suspect that a real passion for human empathy and the user experience was probably not a big factor in the development of the Segway. And I think, and I'm not trying to be flip here, I really do think you could argue that that is reflected in its commercial performance, maybe. So here's another example that takes place in Nairobi, Kenya. I had a great conversation with an anthropology professor recently, Caroline Bertel, and she, when I was trying to describe to her what I do, this was her immediate first story, and it's so perfect. A group of American architects was working in Nairobi with the government, with the Kenyan government, to build public housing, a big block of public housing, hundreds of apartments. And in what I'm sure was a very well-intended effort to save time and money, the American architects decided that they would adapt some plans that they had just recently used for a very similar project in Philadelphia. Those of you who watch Home and Garden television, and there's nothing wrong with that, those of you who watch Home and Garden television are aware of the Americans' desire for an open plan kitchen. We love a space where you can eat and cook and socialize and watch the ball game all in one big space. Not so in Nairobi. Evidently, for many Kenyans, food preparation is a very private affair. It's considered almost unclean. You would never want to serve your guests in the same space where you had prepared the food. In other words, you would never want an open plan kitchen, which is too bad because that is what the Philadelphia plans called for, and that is exactly what got built. And it was more than just a faux pas. It was more than just a cultural faux pas, although I think that's the point of the story. It was also a very expensive mistake because the government ended up having to go back in after all the families had moved into these units and build a wall between the kitchen and the rest of the home. Just a tiny little bit of empathy, a little bit of research into the humans in that system could have prevented that. There is no shortage of stories about bad user experiences, about circumstances where the humans in the situation were not accounted for well enough. But I want to make sure that I'm making the right point here, because as much as I love to complain about a bad user experience, a good user experience is not our entitlement as users. Rather, it is the opportunity. The opportunity is to understand users, find empathy for the users, and design an experience that delights them, or design an experience that really answers the need that you find when you find that empathy. So empathy can make you a more innovative designer. It can make you a more innovative engineer. It can also make you a more innovative waitress. It can make you a more innovative teacher. It can make you a more innovative student. It can make you a more innovative parent. You get the idea. Empathy is good for anybody who is interfacing with other humans. And I think that this is an important key. Unfortunately for me, in my role at the School of Engineering, empathy sounds a little touchy-feely, and we don't tend to use the phrase touchy-feely in a positive sense in our culture. In fact, we often put feeling and thinking as opposites on a spectrum, as in thinking versus feeling in the Myers-Briggs. But as Dan Pink puts it, feeling is a way of thinking. And I would take that further to say that it is especially a way of thinking when feeling, or in this case, empathy, is what allows you to rethink the problem that you're solving. This is what I came to SMU to teach. One of the things I came to SMU to teach. And to engineers, no less. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take a look at this for a second. Okay, we'll edit that, right, Sharon? So this is what I came to SMU to teach, or one of the things I came to SMU to teach. And the thing that I am really trying to do here is to say that to think about certain types of problems, you really have to feel them. And to do that, we're going to have to go out into the world. And the great benefit, the great side effect of going out into the world is that it allows you, it almost forces you to call into question the assumptions that you're making about the people in the system. It forces you to see that Americans and Kenyans feel differently about food preparation before you build something. And I think that this is the important point, because when we question those assumptions, we see the problem differently. And when we see the problem differently, we see different solutions. And a lot of people would call that innovation. I want to make one final point that is much more personal in nature, but that has been a really important factor, a really important personal factor in doing this work, an important side effect that's affected me very profoundly. In years of doing this kind of work, I have done observations and interviews with hundreds of people, hundreds of strangers. And I've spent a lot of time and energy trying to understand their needs, to really interpret their needs. And I've come to really believe in the adage that everybody has a story, that every single one of us is doing the very best we can with the equipment that we have and the circumstances that we're in. And this is an empathy that is really easy to forget day to day. I consider it the greatest personal gift of my work, that each time I do a new study, it is a reminder that every single person that I encounter is fighting something hard, something difficult all the time, every day, usually very privately. And this is an unbelievable, it has had a profound effect on the way I take on the world. Because when you can see that in everyone, you really can rethink the whole world. So empathy is a noun. The verb is understanding. Thank you.